Welcome to In Silico Trials Real Impact, the In Silico UK podcast that's revolutionizing the way we think about medical innovation. I'm Professor Alejandro Frangi from the University of Manchester, and I'll be your guide through this fascinating world of In Silico technologies. In each episode, we'll dive into cutting-edge research and groundbreaking news that are shaping the future of medical product development and regulation. From computational modeling to simulated clinical trials, we are exploring how digital approaches are transforming healthcare, making it safer, more efficient, more equitable, and incredibly precise. So, whether you're a researcher, regulator, a member of the public, or a patient representative, or simply curious about the future of medicine, tune in as we unravel the complex world of in silico methods and their real-world impact. Get ready to discover how computer-simulated trials are leading to very real breakthroughs in patient care. In Silico Trials Real Impact, where algorithms and data are saving lives. Let's begin.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Today, we're really diving deep into a fascinating topic, medical devices.
Absolutely.
But not just like the usual suspects, your stethoscopes, your scalpels.
Right.
We're talking about how computer simulations are changing the game for medical device development, making them safer and more effective for all of us.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. When you think about it, we can basically predict how a device will interact with the body before it even gets there.
It's like a sneak peek inside.
Exactly.
And you might be thinking, okay, simulations for medical devices, why is that so important?
Right.
Let's rewind for a second. Remember that Implant Files investigation a few years back.
Yeah.
That revealed some pretty unsettling statistics.
Definitely.
Almost 83,000 deaths and 1.7 million injuries in just a decade in the U.S. alone. And that's all linked to medical device complications.
Yeah, it really highlights the importance of what we're talking about today.
For sure. And that's precisely where Professor Frangi's work on In Silico clinical trials comes in, offering a potential solution to these very challenges. And that's what we'll be unpacking in this deep dive.
Fascinating stuff.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, I think it's important to understand the current state of medical device testing. What's the landscape like right now?
Absolutely. So traditionally, we've relied on a three-tiered approach: bench testing animal studies, and then finally, human clinical trials.
Okay, so starting with bench testing, that seems pretty straightforward. Test it in a controlled lab setting first.
Right.
But what could go wrong there? I mean, it seems pretty foolproof.
We have to remember the human body is anything but a controlled environment. It's as useful as bench testing is, it just can't fully replicate the incredibly complex interactions happening within us.
Right.
It's like trying to understand an entire rainforest ecosystem just by looking at a single leaf.
I like that analogy.
You get a very limited picture.
Okay, so we need to step it up a notch.
Exactly.
And that's where animal studies come in, but obviously that always comes with ethical considerations.
Of course. And while animal studies can provide valuable insights, there's always the issue of translatability. What works for a rodent might not necessarily work for a human.
Right. Our biology is pretty different.
Exactly. Take, for example, the development of certain anti-inflammatory drugs. Some showed incredible promise in animal studies, but then ended up having serious side effects in humans.
So it's not a perfect system by any means.
Definitely not.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the complexities involved.
Absolutely.
So that brings us to human clinical trials, which are often considered the gold standard.
Right.
But as you mentioned, they have their own set of limitations.
They do. They're crucial, for sure. But they're also incredibly expensive, time-consuming, logistically complex.
It's a huge undertaking.
It really is. I
Yeah.
mean, you have to find the right participants for one, and ensure their safety, which is paramount, and then trying to replicate real-world conditions, that's a whole other challenge.
It's never going to be perfect.
Exactly. And of course, there's always an element of risk when you're testing new medical devices on people.
Of course. So that's where these In Silico clinical trials, or ISCTs, come in.
Exactly.
And it's like you're simulating a whole clinical trial, but in a computer.
Precisely.
So tell me more about how that even works.
So essentially, we use really powerful computer models and massive amounts of data to create what we call virtual patients.
Okay.
And these aren't just simple avatars. We're talking about complex digital representations that take into account a whole range of factors like someone's genetics, their medical history, lifestyle, even individual anatomy.
Wow. So like personalized digital twins almost.
Exactly. And we can then use these virtual patients to basically simulate how a medical device would perform in their bodies.
Oh, wow.
under a whole range of different conditions.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so this allows us to identify potential problems early on, optimize designs, and even predict how well a device will work for specific patient populations, all before we even get to real-life testing.
That's incredible. And Professor Frangi's presentation actually mentioned some really compelling real-world examples of ISCTs in action. One that really stood out to me was the FD-PASS trial for intracranial flow diverters,
Right.
which essentially replicated a clinical trial in a computer.
Yes, exactly. They simulated the performance of these flow diverters, which are used to treat brain aneurysms, and the results they got actually aligned incredibly well with data from previous clinical trials.
Wow, so they were able to validate the accuracy.
Exactly. Which is huge because building trust in this technology is key.
Absolutely.
And this trial actually went beyond just replicating an existing study.
Right. What I found so fascinating was
They were able to explore a wider range of scenarios and patient variations than would ever be feasible in a traditional clinical trial.
wow, so it's like having a clinical trial on fast forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can test numerous variables, gather massive amounts of data, and all in a much shorter time frame.
Right. So not only are we talking about increased safety, but we're also talking about accelerated research and development,
Absolutely.
which could be a game changer for bringing new treatments to patients faster.
Absolutely.
There was another example from Professor Franger's work that I wanted to touch on, the pipeline embolization device, or PED,
Yes.
also used for treating aneurysms. What was particularly interesting about that case?
Yeah, that one really stuck with me too.
Yeah,
It showed how we can use ISCTs to personalize treatment.
exactly. That study used simulations to see how the PED, which is like a tiny implant, would work in patients with different types of aneurysms. So like some people might have larger aneurysms, some smaller, some irregularly shaped.
Yeah.
And in the past, you'd basically get the same device regardless.
One size fits all. Exactly.
Yeah.
But now imagine a future where the device is designed specifically for you based on your anatomy, thanks to these simulations.
So it's like personalized medicine, but for devices. That's amazing.
Precisely.
This all sounds incredibly promising. So does this mean that ISCTs are going to replace traditional testing altogether?
It's a great question. And the short answer is no. It's not about replacement. It's more about collaboration.
Okay, I see.
Think of ISCTs as a powerful new tool in our toolkit. We can use them early in the process to weed out any potential problems and fine-tune designs virtually.
Right.
And then we can conduct more targeted and efficient clinical trials on real patients to really confirm those findings and make sure everything works as expected in the real world.
So it's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And this actually brings us to another really exciting aspect of ISCTs. Their potential to really revolutionize how we approach medical research,
Okay.
especially in areas where traditional trials face significant challenges.
You're talking about things like pediatric medicine and rare diseases,
Exactly.
where finding enough participants for traditional clinical trials can be incredibly difficult,
It's a huge hurdle.
right?
And conducting trials on children in particular comes with a whole set of ethical and logistical challenges.
Of course.
But with ISCTs, we can create virtual pediatric patients, allowing us to study device safety and efficacy in ways that simply weren't possible before.
That's incredible.
And for rare diseases where patient populations are often small and geographically dispersed, ISCTs offer a way to conduct virtual trials that would be practically impossible otherwise.
So we're really breaking down barriers and opening up a whole new world of possibilities with this technology.
We are. It's about faster development, safer devices, and ultimately more effective treatments for everyone, especially those who have been underserved by traditional models.
It's about creating a more equitable healthcare system.
Precisely.
This has been an amazing conversation, truly mind-blowing. And as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. Imagine a future where getting a new medical device is as safe and predictable as, say, getting a software update on your phone.
I love that analogy.
That's the kind of future that ISCTs are building towards. A future where cutting-edge medical technology is not only more effective, but also more accessible to everyone. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey into the future of medicine.